All right, welcome. We're so glad to have you join us today. We are here to talk about behavior. So behavior, obviously, we know is such an important topic and something that, a lot of us know so critical to the work that we do, not only understanding behavior, but how do we support patients and families and individuals with autism as they make their way through the day. And so today we have a great team of experts that are going to help us better understand behavior and behavior solutions. One of the things I know as a pediatrician who specializes in the evaluation, diagnosis, and longitudinal care of people with autism is that behavior is critical. A lot of the work that I do as that pediatrician focuses on all sorts of things, but still behavior is something that I have teammates that are experts in. And I'm so delighted today to be able to share with you expertise from these phenomenal experts. And so I am going to introduce them to you now, and then we'll have a great opportunity to hear from them and then also walk through some important questions and answers. So I'm Kristen Soul. I am the proud founder and director of Echo Autism. And again, I'm a pediatrician specializing in autism and developmental disorders, and certainly so glad to be part of this fantastic team. Today, we have Brandon May. He is a board certified and licensed behavior analyst. Brandon is the facilitator of Echo Autism Behavior Solutions and the hub team for the developmental disabilities Echo. Brandon's employed at the School of Medicine at Washington University in St. Louis and the president and CEO of Elite ABA Services. Brandon's primary research interests involve improving physical fitness in individuals with developmental disabilities. He has presented at national and international conferences, and his work has been published in peer-reviewed journals. Cy Nadler is a clinical psychologist and the director of autism services at Children's Mercy Kansas City. His practice, research, and training activities focus on expanding access to evidence-based services for youth with autism and developmental disabilities and their families. Amber Lashley is a certified child life specialist and worked for over 10 years at MU Children's Hospital, providing psychosocial care and support for patients and families in the hospital. Currently, Amber works as a performance improvement coordinator at MU Children's Hospital, working to improve quality and safety for patients and families. Kelly Schultz is an assistant professor of pediatrics at the University of Iowa Steed Family Children's Hospital. Dr. Schultz is a licensed psychologist and a board-certified behavior analyst who specializes in the assessment and treatment of severe challenging behavior displayed by children with developmental disabilities. In addition, she is to serving as an expert panelist for Echo Autism Behavior Solutions. She is an established clinician and researcher who studies the effects of coaching and training parents on behavioral procedures, such as functional communication training via telehealth, and the treatment outcomes on long-term maintenance of behavior. We are so lucky to have these folks joining us today to help us better understand behavior, but also more importantly, how do we break that down? I was sharing with this team that even though I've been doing the work that I do for a long time, I still really struggle to explain the basics of ABA when I'm teaching my residents and my fellows and the learners that I teach. And so I'm so excited to get to learn alongside everyone today. And so we're going to be digging into this topic more. And so we get a chance to hear from the experts. And then the question and answer session will really give us a chance to continue to learn further and apply that knowledge in different ways. So I'm going to turn it over to Brandon to walk us through this important topic, and then we will dig into further information in our questions and answers together. So Brandon, over to you.
Thank you, Kristen, and thanks everybody for joining me today. The Hub team, I think we have a great group of experts, as Kristen said, and so I'm excited to share what I have and then hear from everyone else as well. I'm glad you guys are taking the time to watch the video and hope you learned something. So as Kristen alluded to, this is the Behavior Solutions Take Action webinar. And this is kind of my information. We're going to start with providing kind of just an overview of what applied behavior analysis is. I think that people hear that a lot, especially in the autism community early on in the process where you receive a diagnosis and your head is spinning and you're not sure what to do. Somebody's in there telling you, you need ABA services a lot of the time, but they may not have great information on exactly what that is, how to access it. And so hopefully we can demystify that a little bit today by providing just an overview of what ABA is, kind of some of the main principles we're looking at in terms of understanding behavior and why it occurs and how that relates to treatment. And then thinking through some pretty basic preventative strategies. We don't have time to go through kind of all the tips and tricks we might use, but we'll start with some general ones that could be really easily implemented in a home setting or a school setting or any kind of like a primary care setting where you're working with individuals with autism. So we're going to kind of provide, again, more of a general overview. We'll do some Q&A at the end, and then if you have follow-up questions, you can reach out to the ECHO team, and we're more than happy to answer them. So we'll go ahead and move into what ABA is. So I'm gonna just get all my bullets out here now. So this is kind of just a slide where we're breaking ABA down into like the 3 words of applied behavior analysis. And so the broad big picture of this is we're looking at like, how does behavior occur within the environment? How does the environment influence behavior? And then how do we change the environment to see more of the behaviors we want to see and less of the behaviors that are causing an individual difficulty? And that could take place in any setting where the individual's involved, whether that's the home, whether that's the doctor's office, whether that's the school, whether it's going to get a haircut or go to the dentist's office. This stuff all applies. And so we're just really thinking about, as behavior analysts, how do we understand what's reinforcing or motivating for the individual? How does that change their behavior? We're looking at socially significant behaviors, meaning that we really want to focus on what's meaningful for the individual we're working with, but also the family that they're living with, the environment that we're really kind of trying to understand the behavior within, and then we're trying to make change that's meaningful for that individual. Behavior, we're looking at observable and measurable behavior. We really focus on what we can understand through direct observation, and a little bit less on individuals kind of reporting things. Not that stuff isn't important, not that it's not important to understand feelings and emotions. We think those things follow similar principles, and they're just a little bit more difficult to access. So we really just kind of focus the most on what's observable and measurable behavior. And then we're really a data-driven science. Behavior analysts are notorious for having like tons of graphs and asking about data all the time, to the point that it's probably a little bit annoying for other people. But it's important in how we make our decisions and how we base our treatment options. So we really look at providing a lot of data to individuals and using that data to inform the way we practice. As I said, behavior analysis is kind of a broad field. And so we think about it a lot of times as being like a little kid sitting at a desk getting Skittles for touching the color red. And that's a part of what we do, but it's a small part. ABA is a broad field that works in building a lot of different skills and reducing a lot of different challenging behaviors, and uses a ton of different strategies to do that. So these are not comprehensive lists. They're just kind of intended as ways to provide some broad categories of common intervention targets that behavior analysts might work with. And these are common skills if you're a parent or a teacher, that you might see with an individual with autism, that you might say, oh, maybe a behavior analyst would be a good resource for me to seek out. So things like academic skills, for having difficulty in school or difficulty learning or difficulty doing their homework. Daily living skills, so that's things like, are we having difficulty brushing our teeth because it's really aversive to brush our teeth because we have some sort of a sensory sensitivity, or we're too busy playing our iPad to transition from a preferred to a non-preferred activity. Social skills, again, this talk is pretty specific to individuals with autism, and so that social skills piece might be difficult. We might have a kiddo who's super smart and really wants so badly to have friends, but has some difficulty in how do we approach friends, how do we have a conversation that's not revolved strictly around some Minecraft video game that involves multiple people and multiple things that they're interested in too. When we have individuals that are ready to transition, behavior analysts might work a lot with how do we get them ready for the job market and do some on-the-job training. Health and wellness, which is a passion of mine, is kind of like how do we work with individuals with autism who might eat one brand of chicken nuggets, which I think Sai talked about at one of our last ECHO sessions, but we have kids that might have really particular eating interests. And so how do we expand that to new foods? How do we get them on an exercise routine? Because that might help them in a lot of different areas of their life. And then reducing challenging behaviors. Again, this is not a whole list of every challenging behavior we might work with, but this is a common list where individuals might be physically aggressive. They might use curse words or scream or use some sort of language that's not appropriate. They might engage in self-stimulatory behavior or self-injury. Anyway, it's just a lot of different versions or topographies of behaviors that we might see. So these are just different kind of versions of that. And we have strategies to treat all of these because we treat them based on why they're occurring, which we'll talk about here in a second. Additionally, ABA is applied across different settings. Again, it's not just at a preschool with a little kid. It might also be in, elementary school, high school, adult day programs. I know I work for part of my time in a psychiatric unit for adolescents, children and adolescents. So we work in inpatient units. They're outpatient clinics tied to universities and not tied to universities. So there's just a broad array of environments in which ABA can be applied. Again, I know in Colombia, the team has done an awesome job of getting local businesses set up to implement some strategies that are based in applied behavior analysis. So just having like a dentist's office with a token system and a visual schedule can be such a game changer. Having a pediatrician that has it set up on their board that says like who's next in line and what are you going to do? You're going to go in and you're going to do your vitals first, and then you're going to see the nurse, and then you're going to see the doctor. Like those things can be really critical for individuals. So we're going to talk a lot about ABA as kind of like this specialty field. But I think the goal of ECHO is to get the knowledge into the hands of the people that use it, that are working with these kids most frequently. And so hopefully these are kind of the things that you can take from this kind of a presentation. And then different populations. Again, like we're talking about autism and developmental disabilities today. That is, if you're thinking about kind of like what are the evidence-based treatments for that group, ABA is considered the gold standard. It's got a lot of insurance backing behind it now. It has government health agencies supporting the use and recommending the use of applied behavior analysis. But there also are a ton of other groups that we work with, and so I'm not going to go over each of those individually. I just think it's important to know that this is about behavior. It's not about a specific population. And who's qualified to do this? Again, like as a specific field, if you're working with an individual with really challenging behaviors, like you probably are going to need an expert. You're going to need a board certified behavior analyst to help you get through that. But for a lot of the people who are watching this webinar, I hope like you might not be working with an individual with severe challenging behavior in your dentist office as a counselor, as a parent. You might just be thinking like, what are some basic strategies we can use? And we're going to go through that towards the end. What are the basic strategies? But I also think it's important to know that if you are in a position where you need that expert, you need the help, this is kind of the general model that's used. And so we just kind of have like a board certified behavior analyst here in red up here, who's leading a case, who's doing the assessment, who's putting a program in place. And then we have a lot of times registered behavior technicians or some form of a direct support person who works under them. And that's because behavior analysis is designed a lot of times to be a more intensive treatment than a lot of other professionals would be. So it's not like going to your counselor 1 hour a week. A lot of times behavior analysts will be needing to work with the client for 10, 15, 20 hours a week. If we have an individual that has, a pretty severe skill deficits or a lot of challenging behaviors, we're really trying to create a good behavioral approach that wraps around their day for a large chunk of their day. And so a lot of times the behavior analyst's job is to write the program, and then we have people that help us implement that for larger chunks of time. Again, in a model where you might have less severe behaviors, these RBTs might just be replaced by like caregivers, parent A, parent B, sibling B, and the behavior analyst is kind of coaching them through, here are the strategies we need to be implementing throughout your day. Let's talk about how we're using this token economy, or let's talk about how we're teaching this individual to ask for things rather than to throw a tantrum, or to be patient walking through the store so that they can earn access to the candy bar at the end versus throwing the tantrum to try to access it. So again, this is kind of the more professional model, but can easily be applied to more of a primary caregiver based model also. Now we'll move into our general behavior principles section. Again, I'm gonna try not to get too far into the weeds of this, but I think it's important to kind of set the stage for you. So we talk about behaviors being kind of like the ABCs a lot, right? And I think that's really important, and we'll talk about that in our next slide. But it really kind of just, it's oversimplifies sometimes what we think about as behavior analysts. Setting events, like we could talk about like all these complicated things with it, but the big piece is like, what's going on throughout your day is going to influence what happens next. So if you don't sleep well, like that fuse you have that normally is this long is now like that long, right? And that's an example of a setting event. And so it's just like how if you don't take your medicine, or if there's things, if you had some sort of a fight with your spouse, like those things affect your day. And the ABCs are really important. We're going to talk about those, but it also has to take place in this context. And that's what we're looking at with setting events. Motivating operations are kind of the next piece. And that just means that like, we're always going to be looking at like, why is this behavior occurring? What is the individual getting out of it? And motivating operations just refer to like how influential is a given reinforcer at any given time. So like, I know that whenever I skip breakfast, I'm going to be more likely to stop at McDonald's on the way to work because I'm hungry. And that's all a motivating operation is. It's just like, how does that change in your day influence what's reinforcing for you, and how does that impact your behavior? So again, those are the things that I think provide the context for the ABCs and set the stage for the ABCs. So I hope those things make sense. The ABCs themselves, the antecedents, behaviors, and consequences, are what we hear the most about. Again, that's kind of like what happens immediately before the behavior is our antecedent. What the behavior looks like is our B, our behavior, and our consequence is what happens after the behavior. I think we get really kind of focused on these three things. I think they're really important. But again, this is kind of a simplified version. So if we're looking at common antecedents, it might be like a student is told to do their math homework, and the behavior might be, well, once they tell me to do my math homework, now I'm going to rip up my math homework. And the consequence might be now the teacher sends them out of the class, right? So the kid didn't want to do their math homework. The antecedent was it was provided to them to do their math homework. There's an instruction. The behavior is rip this up, and the consequence is I get out of math. It's a party, right? I get to go do my thing, right? So we're really looking at how the things that happen before the behavior and after the behavior influence the future occurrence of that behavior. So now this kid's going to be more likely to rip up his homework next time his teacher gives it to him because it got him out of doing it last time. So when we look at those ABCs, that's really what we're looking at. What preceded the behavior and what happened after it, and how does that then influence the next time they're presented in a similar situation? And I'm not going to spend much time on this, but just generally be thinking about like there are things that are reinforcing and things that are punishing. And when we're thinking about those consequences, there are going to be things that make the behavior more likely to occur in the future or less likely to occur in the future. If it's increasing behavior in the future, it's reinforcement. If it's decreasing it in the future, it's punishment. So we really, as behavior analysts, don't use punishment very often in most settings. So we're really kind of focused on this reinforcement side. And how do we create, even if we have behavior that we want to decrease, our general approach is, well, how do we reinforce alternatives to help them get their needs met versus how do we punish them away? So we're going to really focus on the reinforcement side here. So we have two versions. We have positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. Positive reinforcement is just kind of like your simple, like your mom might always, my kids go to their grandma's house and it's always eat your vegetables and you can have your cake, right? So that's just an example of positive reinforcement. You engage in behavior A, you access some sort of reward for engaging in that behavior. And now in the future, if you're more likely to eat your vegetables, then you've got a good reinforcement system. So positive reinforcement is just adding something to the environment to make the behavior more likely to occur in the future. Negative reinforcement in popular culture is a bad thing, and behavior analysis is a good thing. So this is, again, it's increasing behavior, but it's removing something that the individual might not be a fan of, right? So just taking a break from your homework is an example of negative reinforcement. I'm removing an aversive stimulus. I'm removing homework and taking a break from it, and that could be reinforcing. So we might be teaching an individual, okay, rather than ripping up your math homework in our last example, just raise your hand and ask for a break. And that's allowing access to negative reinforcement. They're escaping or avoiding that math homework for a period of time. So I think hopefully the reinforcement piece makes sense. Again, that's kind of like I call it like the golden ticket, right? Like it's kind of like our primary go-to. If I had to pick one behavioral principle to talk about the most, it's this reinforcement piece. And it's one that I think as we're thinking about how we're using these principles in whatever environment you might be in, this reinforcement piece is the biggest thing to think of. How is the individual being reinforced for this specific behavior? What are they getting out of it? And then how do I change that to help to help modify it so they can get access to reinforcement more appropriately? Moving along those lines, we're going to be thinking about reinforcement in a couple different ways. So there's kind of what we consider 4 functions of behavior that are kind of large buckets that we try to kind of put reinforcement in. So We talk about individuals seeking attention, seeking tangible items, seeking escape, and automatic reinforcement. There's a lot more nuance to that, but as you just kind of are thinking through, again, if you're in a setting where an individual is engaging in some sort of inappropriate behavior, or you have a very specific target behavior you want the individual to engage in, you're thinking about like, well, what are they getting out of this behavior, and how do I set up a system for them to get their needs met more appropriately? So if an individual is telling jokes that are not appropriate in the classroom while the teacher's talking, and all the kids are laughing, well, can we find a way to get them some time to tell jokes at a different point where it's more appropriate, right? Or can we teach them a joke that maybe isn't so inappropriate? So how do we get them access to attention in a way that's going to be socially appropriate? Escape a break from math homework. How do we get a break from? I use this a lot where we might have kids that don't want to do their chores after dinner, right? And so it's like, if you can do one dish, then you can take a break, and if you can now do two dishes the next day, then you can be done, right? So it's how do we get them to engage in a target behavior and then avoid like this bigger, more aversive event. Tangible items are a pretty classic one. So that's the kid that won't get off their iPad, and every time you try to get them off their iPad, they throw a huge tantrum, right? So we might teach them to ask for more time. We might teach them that if they, get their bedtime routine done, then they can read an extra book. So ways that we're thinking, okay, what is the individual getting out of this tantrum, and how do we help them get it in a more appropriate way? And then automatic reinforcement is like, we're really looking at a lot of those like self-stimulatory behaviors that are really common in kids with autism, where it's, hand flapping or rocking, but also things like eating certain foods to a detriment of other things, right? So it's the behavior itself is reinforcing. They're engaging in that behavior because it provides its own reinforcement. And those are a little trickier to find alternatives for, but we can definitely do that too. So again, what we're really looking at is trying to understand why the behavior is occurring, and that then helps us identify how we should approach the next step in our interventions. And we're going to talk about, again, kind of these are proactive interventions. I don't have anything in here for like teaching a ton of new skills. It's easy to just get down a rabbit hole and have a 3-hour webinar instead of a 90-minute webinar, or whatever this ends up being. So I kind of had to pick and choose, but these are really common interventions that you can use proactively, that you just build in your day, that you just plan on including these, so that the individual has a better likelihood of success. And then we, again, down the road can be looking at, if these things are not effective, what are some good, more direct teaching approaches that could be implemented as well. So some antecedent interventions that we're going to be looking at are non-contingent reinforcement, choice-based interventions, visual schedules, and social stories. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on any of them. We'll kind of go over each of them, and then if I know Kristen, she'll probably have additional questions about them later on. So we might get more into some of them later on in the question and answer section. But non-contingent reinforcement is just looking at, you're providing some sort of reinforcer on a schedule, and it's independent of the individual's behavior. So if it's just like the kid is having a lot of issues because they want to play with their iPad, you're setting up a system where they just have, okay, now just 3 times a day, you get your iPad for 30 minutes, and no matter what's going on in your day, we're making time for that. And what that does is it really changes the motivation to engage in those inappropriate behaviors, because they're already getting it for free. Like, you don't have to go in this whole deal of like time and asking and all of these kind of like managing their behavior. You're just saying, if I can just interrupt this by providing it on a schedule that's going to be effective, and help this individual get what they need from it, I don't have to do anything else. And so that's a really simple and straightforward system, that you're really, again, the first piece is understanding why the behavior is occurring. If you're throwing an iPad at somebody who wants attention, this isn't going to be effective. But if you're providing attention because the individual is attention seeking, it's going to be really effective. Some of the main advantages of this are it's easy to implement. So it's easy for parents to do. I use this a lot when I'm working with the rec support staff that don't have a ton of training. I just say, okay, set up a timer and we'll just provide reinforcement on this schedule, and you don't have to do anything else. It gets the kid access to more reinforcement. So because you just have it on this time schedule, the individual is going to see a lot of benefit from your intervention. And so it's a nice way like to really build a relationship with a kid, because you're giving them dense, high access to things that they like. And the research actually says that the using this system can effectively reduce behaviors to the same level as other more complicated interventions. So if you look at things like a token economy or some sort of a teaching approach, those are really, really great interventions. But just providing this time-based schedule can reduce problem behavior to a similar degree. So it's, again, I think it's a really great frontline strategy for people to use and to build into their schedules. The big disadvantage is that it doesn't teach anything, right? So like if you're just getting your iPad for free all the time, like it might reduce your behavior, but it's not teaching you what to do in times where you can't have it or you really want it outside of that time schedule and no one's there to provide it, and it's not time yet. So it doesn't teach you to ask for it. It doesn't really teach you like, you get it if you wait. If you don't wait, then we're gonna have to hold on to the iPad longer. So there's no teaching approach to this intervention. So even though it's great, it's a great frontline strategy. There might be times where you might need to again involve a more teaching a teaching based strategy for how to do something to get that iPad outside of just getting it for free. Choice-based interventions, exactly what it sounds like. So it's just like, how do you give an individual more control over their environment? And so this is something that I see a lot in schools. I know I end up in this place as a parent all the time where I'm like, well, we're going to do this because I said, and it's like, that's just stupid. Like, why am I dying on this hill right now? Like, there are things that are really important, but like, do I really care if you like brush your teeth before get your pajamas on? Why does that matter, right? But we get stuck in this. Well, I said do this, so do this. Do what I say, kind of thing. And the more that we can provide options for our individuals that we're working with, the more I think the more flexible we can be. They're going to see that, and then whenever we really do need to lock in and follow through with something, they're going to be more open to it. If you try to push 10 different things, people are just going to get sick of it. If it's just, okay, this is what's really important, the rest of your day I'm going to be flexible on, you get a lot more compliance. So you can do that with what individuals are working for, like what do you want that is exciting in your day, what do you want to schedule that you're interested um, in schools. I do a lot of like, okay, you have to do math, but do you want to do math first or do you want to do reading first? Or you have to do math, but do you want to use a blue crayon, a red crayon, a black pen? What do you want to write your answers with? So just little things like that, where I've decided here's what I can't bend on, but I'm willing to bend on these other things. And so sometimes you can just see the individual based on just getting that choice, has a lot more buy into your system and is more interested in being engaged with you. And then the research again says that using just choices alone will increase pro-social behaviors, so things like being on task, things like following directions, and also decrease problem behavior. So again, it's not the end all be all solution. It's not going to improve everything. Again, it's not teaching anything, but it is a way to be preventative and proactive when you have an individual in a situation that might be challenging for them. Visual cues. So I know this is, especially in schools, it's like when you have a kid with autism, the first question is always like, do they have a visual schedule? And so I think this is a common go-to for kids on the spectrum, especially. I think their visual cues are great. We can use them for a lot of different skills that we're teaching. We can use them to help provide a lot of predictability, really help with independence. But a lot of times I see them not implemented correctly also. It's just kind of, here's this visual schedule and we're going to put it up at this kid's desk and that's all we're going to do. And then we're going to expect the kid's going to be perfect now. And so that's not really how it works exactly. But we'll kind of talk about some ways visual cues are used and then what is an appropriate way to use visual cues here in just a second. So these are some examples of ways you can use visual cues, visual schedules. And this is not comprehensive. These are just a couple different examples. So on the left here, we have like a whole day basically that's broken down on a visual schedule. So these are like, you're going to wake up, go to school, have a field trip, come home and get a snack, right? So it's like these large chunks of time are broken down in this visual schedule. So it's kind of like, this is maybe a visual version of my Google Calendar, right? It's like, this is what I got to do to get from point A to point B. But it's not providing a ton of detail. So this might be something for a kid that needs a little predictability, who's pretty high functioning and understands like what these things look like, but just needs to kind of know, okay, today we're going to have dinner around this time and we're going to go to bed at this time, and just having that extra layer of predictability can be good. The middle here, we have a first then, which is a lot of times we'll use these for kids that are starting a new program, who are early learners maybe, and it's just two things. So it's just like, do this fun thing and then this good thing happens. It's just first this, then this. And we talk about first then language all the time when we're working with kids on the spectrum. So it's just like, first we got to go, get our shot and then we get our sucker, right? Maybe that's a little old school for pediatricians' offices now. I don't know, you guys are giving out suckers as much, but it's first we got to do this, then this good thing happens. And this is kind of that added layer of visual support to help provide that communication in a visual format also. And then this one on the right side I like because it's breaking down a routine into a much smaller section. And I'm going to try and minimize my screen here so you guys can see. There's like these little check marks here too. So it's kind of what we talk about as a task analysis. So it's breaking down the morning routine into several different steps. So you're waking up, you're feeding and watering the dog, making the bed. And as you're going through each of these steps, you're putting this little check mark down. So you're kind of, it's not just a visual to tell you what you're doing. It's also a way to kind of track progress through the day. So that's the way that we're breaking a larger skill down into more discrete components. So I talked about like, we a lot of times just put these things out there and hope for the best. And that's not the most effective way to get these things used consistently. So really like anything else, you have to teach somebody how to use this, right? So you have to kind of, as you're using this visual schedule for the first time, as we're teaching the kid, okay, your morning routine is to wake up and feed and water the dog. We're going back to the schedule and praising them for using the schedule and say, okay, now let's use our check mark. Awesome, that's great. You completed this. Now let's go back. And so you're having to really kind of like teach them how to reference the schedule, teach them how to use it to their advantage. And a lot of times that gets missed. Again, we just kind of put the schedule on the kid's desk and hope that they use it effectively. So making sure that you're actually teaching how to use the visual schedule is really important. What to use as an individual's accessing a visual schedule can also be really important. I've seen situations where they put those little like cartoon picture that looks nothing like any real object up on somebody's desk, and they have no idea what it even is, and everyone's all pissed off that they can't like figure out how to use the system. And it's like, well, it doesn't look like them. They don't even know what this picture is, and so sometimes it might be, rather than using those little text cartoon pictures, we need to use real pictures, or we need to use pictures of the individual actually engaging in those specific activities, and that can really be a game changer also. I know that sometimes we have individuals that you could use the predictability, and someone gives them the little cartoon schedule and they're like, what is this? Like, I can read, I can write, and you're sticking this stupid stick figure in my face. What's going on? And so like, it may be that instead of having these cute little cartoon pictures, we need to just have words and just have them write it down. And that might be the end of it. Or how do we use technology? Like, so really just like, what is the format of the visual schedule can be important. How much to present at once. So that's what we looked at in our last, we had 3 different examples up there of like a full day, like an immediate first then, and like a breaking down a routine. So just really figuring like, based on what the student's current ability level is, or what is this kid currently able to really comprehend at once, might really determine how much you put on a visual schedule. If I have a 2.5-year-old kid and I want to use a visual schedule, I'm not going to put their whole day out there and expect them to follow that. It might really just be a really short chunk of time. Ease of use. So just kind of, again, making sure that it's easy to use for you guys who are going to be implementing the system as parents, as teachers, as frontline personnel. So that making sure that you have a system that's going to be easy to use for you guys is important. And then I always like to think, in an ideal world, you want to have those visuals faded out at some point. Like, if you can, there are going to be kids and adults and individuals that need the visual schedule forever, and there's nothing wrong with that either. But if you have a kid who is able to learn their routine using a visual schedule and then back off a little bit, it's going to just add more ability, more independence for them. So I think it's important to think about that stuff if it's an option for the individual. I think this is my last slide. So social stories. I put these in here because people use them all the time, not because they're necessarily my favorite intervention, but I do think people love them, and they're not going to hurt anything. So I think I include it in here so you guys kind of have an understanding of the social stories are used, again, to help with that predictability piece, to help an individual kind of understand, this is what, if I go to the doctor's office, this is what I'm going to do, this is what to expect. and this is how I should act. And so I think those social stories can be helpful. They certainly can't be harmful, and it's an intervention that's used a lot. There's a lot of great resources on Teachers Pay Teachers and Pinterest and all of these places that will have social stories for you. So you can, if you're a good Googler or a good social media person, you can find a ton of these social stories out there. They're used a lot. Again, I don't think there's anything that's going to be hurt by using them. I just haven't seen a ton of research saying that they're super effective. So anyways, the social stories are adaptable, can be used, can't hurt anything. And they can be pretty cute. So nothing wrong with social story. So that's all I have. I appreciate your guys' time and attention. And I'll send it back to Kristen for the Q&A part.
Thank you so much, Brandon. That was wonderful. I learned so much, and I can't wait for us to have a chance to kind of talk together about this really important topic that we all are, again, living and breathing every day. And so if you'll go ahead and unshare your screen, then we can have that conversation. And I think, as I think about behavior, certainly it strikes me how much all of us use this every day. And I know you guys are behavior experts, and I just like to pretend to play one on TV, I like to say. And so when I think about it though, every day I operate off my calendar, which is a visual support, if you will. And those are important things, I think, for all of us to know. And so thank you so much for highlighting some of those, just basics that we have. And also, I think, some of the important takeaways that I heard in addition to some really deeper dives into the content were things like picking your battles, right? So as parents, sometimes we get hung up on certain things having to be in certain ways or certain things. And so choice-based decision-making can be helpful. Again, I know I'm picking some of the higher level aspects of your talk, and I know some of the content is super detailed. And so that's certainly not what I intend to do. But I just think, as all of us human beings, our behavior is intricate, and yet at the same time, there's some common themes that we can pick from. And so I want to open up our conversation here just to kind of think through, as we're working with individuals on the spectrum or children in general, I think sometimes we have to remember that they're kids. So let's start in the place of just at home and supporting kiddos at home with parents. When we think about temper tantrums and we think about just a regular old run-of-the-mill temper tantrum, what are some go-to things as a parent that we could, and right now I'm just going to leave it actually pretty darn broad. So it doesn't have to necessarily even be around autism, but so temper tantrum at home, what's something that a parent can do to think about that behavior and something that they might be able to think about when they're looking at their child having a fit on the floor? What would be something that you, and I'm going to pick on Sai first. Sai, what would you say to a parent that comes and says, my kid is just throwing a fit all the time. I don't know why. I don't know what to do. What would you say to them?
Yeah, well, that is the number one thing that parents tell us universally. And the truth is that in the moment, you've got limited options, right? When a kid's having a tantrum in my office, I say, okay. And, part of what we do is try and take the oxygen out of the room, so to speak. We think about those functions, those reasons why kids have tantrums that Brandon was talking about, and try and remove them strategically. But the truth is, prevention is worth a pound of, cure or back end, management. And so there are only a couple of reasons why kids have tantrums, right? They have tantrums because they want us to react to them in some way, provide attention, to give them back that iPad, or to keep it, or to get out of whatever we're offering them that they're not thrilled about. And so it's not mysterious, but sometimes it takes a little bit of observation, some digging, some using these perspectives. And so from a prevention standpoint, if kids are after attention, well, let's provide them lots of attention in advance of the tantrum. That's that non-contingent reinforcement strategy Brandon talked about. Let's let them earn access to the good stuff, starting with really easy expectations and building them up. Let's teach them the skills that they need to ask for a break instead of scream for it. Those are the very beginnings of how we would approach that with a parent.
I like it. That's super helpful. And so, Amber, from your role in working in the hospital, I know you and I work together in the hospital too, and thinking about all kinds of kiddos that are getting ready to have sometimes we know them to be regular procedures, but they as a child don't have any idea. So they're often scared. Talk to me about how you think about that and that, approach to a child who may be having a behavior. So we can label it with whatever we want, a tantrum, a this, a that, but we know that they're also probably scared. Can you talk to us through kind of your approach to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we know that fear and anxiety with going to a doctor or a hospital probably resonates with most families and most individuals when they have children with them. It's a scary place, and most of it is scary because it's the unknown, right? Or an experience they had in the past was a negative experience. And so the fear from that negative experience just kind of increases as the child thinks about it more. So there are a number of different ways to help children with that fear and anxiety with the hospital. And probably one of the best ways is preparation, right? So we know the more that kids know, the better that they'll react. And so for a long time, it was believed that we just didn't tell them anything and we get there and we deal with it when we get there. But we know that's not the best way for children to cope. And so making sure that we're letting them know about what's going to happen, giving them the appropriate sensory information about maybe especially now during COVID, what it's going to look like when we go into the hospital, but there are people wearing a mask, which we probably know now more than we've ever done before, but people will be wearing gowns and goggles and gloves and why they're wearing those. So just making sure that we're giving them the appropriate information that they need to know before we go in. And then making sure that if you are the caregiver, that you are speaking for your child and you're advocating for them and their needs. So if you're fortunate and you're in a children's hospital, you could ask the staff there, and I suggest asking in advance, like if there are professionals, like such as a child life specialist, that can help during those procedures, because there's all kinds of things that they can do. So they can also help with preparation and giving them a few more details that are appropriate for their development. They can work with doing distraction with developmentally appropriate toys and items that kids really engage with or really make them happy, and so that there's something positive happening. They can also help give them attainable roles and give you a role as a parent or a caregiver. So your role could be how to hold your child most comfortable for them, and how to engage with them. And so there are multiple different things to do to make that experience a positive one. And that's definitely what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make those experiences positive, so that fear of the negative experience doesn't keep adding to itself.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Because I know that can be really hard. And certainly that role of a parent is a really big one. I find that they feed on each other, right? The more scared the parent is, the more fearful the child often is. And, I think all of us, and I'm always reminded that anytime we're about to experience something new, whether you're a child, you're an adult, it doesn't really matter. We kind of all need to have an idea of what's about to happen. And so I think that for us as humans, that is a really important foundation. And sometimes for adults, we forget that our kids haven't had those experiences. So for example, just like you said, I think for the longest time, we've had this notion of like, just don't tell them, we're going to sneak up and give them a shot and then they won't notice, right? But we know that that is not a good strategy, because they might not notice that time, but you bring them back the next time and they will remember. And so then that is not helpful, right? These little people are human beings and they experience things just like we do. And so sometimes one of the things I find very helpful when I'm talking with families is to remind them of that, and to remind them that preparation and that setting expectations at an age appropriate level is really important. And so that same thing goes, in thinking through some experiences I've had recently. My little girl just had to have surgery. And frankly, it was super important for me to know what to expect so that I could be calm, so that she could then be calm. She was frankly calmer than me. And so, knowing what to expect. And just like Brandon, you so perfectly put it, I didn't need a visual schedule, but I did need to have a pretty clear idea of arrive here, arrive now, go here, do this, go, and that was a visual schedule, right? So a verbal schedule. But that helped a lot, so that morning in a stressful situation, I knew what was going to happen. And I think when we talk about behavior, what did that allow me to do, right? It allowed me to breathe, take in oxygen, reduce my anxiety about that important situation. And this could go for anything: coming to the doctor for an autism evaluation, coming to the doctor for immunizations, going to the restaurant that last time you went and it was an utter nightmare and you had to leave because, you know, your kid had a fit, right? All of these things, right, are often rooted in these either situational anxiety moments or what have you. But when you kind of have those steps of what to expect, I think it's really helpful. But I don't know about everyone listening, but when I sometimes don't realize that I have a framework in my head as an adult, like I know what to expect. I don't even necessarily think to tell my child. But when I stop and realize, oh, they don't have a frame of reference, like they have no idea, right? And so certainly when I'm talking with my patients and reminding them, like, now remember, they've never done this before. They've never gone to kindergarten. You know what going to kindergarten looks like. They don't. So let's talk through what we need to do to help support them going successfully on their first day to kindergarten, the sights, the sounds, the this, the that, right? So sometimes I think those are really important things. So Amber, I think that's helpful just to help think through, you know, I know on that hospital side, but then as we broaden our horizons to think about, okay, we think going to the restaurant is just an automatic born trait. You're born knowing what it means to walk into a very busy place with tables everywhere and people serving you food. Not necessarily, right? And so sometimes I think we can help to establish that too. So, all right, so thinking through then, examples, actually, let's get down to kind of some practicalities. So thinking about going to some everyday places. You know, if we are talking to a family or working with a family who, and we know this happens a lot, where due to either sensory issues or stuff going on, loud noises can be really challenging. You know, Kelly, I know you have just vast expertise in working with kids and families. Let's say a family has a goal that they really would like to start going to a restaurant or even just trying to enter a restaurant. What would be some strategies that they could start to think about?
So that's a great question. It's a question we get all the time, and even outside of restaurants, it's going to the grocery store, it's going to Walmart, it's going really just about anywhere. So, you know, I think the preparation piece is helpful. It can be really helpful, but we also, I think, need sometimes more of a training plan. Maybe in a non-jargony way to put it, but you know, how to be able to get to the point, because it's pretty unrealistic if you've struggled eating at a restaurant or struggled getting through the whole grocery store to think that all the preparation is just going to allow you to get through that entire visit, right, from the very beginning, especially if they've have a history of problem behavior in that setting. They're probably not going to be successful. And so we want to think about reducing the effort so that it is successful, so that we can reward those successes, and then gradually fade to a place where we can go and be there the whole time. So oftentimes, actually, grocery stores are maybe a little bit easier to think about than a restaurant, because most of us just don't go to a restaurant for 2 seconds and then leave. We want to go and eat and, you know, do all of those fun things. So with a grocery store, though, what I would think about is, so I might use the visual schedules that Brandon talked about, and it may say something like, we're getting milk, right? And then as soon as we get the milk, we're leaving, and their most fun thing's going to be available, whether that's the iPad in the car, whether we're going to go to the park, we're going to go get ice cream, whatever that child's very preferred thing is. As soon as we get that trip completed, then they're going to earn that particular reward. And that is that reinforcement piece, that positive reinforcement piece, that's going to help teach them that that's the behaviors they needed to engage in to get these really positive outcomes. So often I'll tell families, start at the gas station. Just go get that gallon of milk, because you don't have to go to the very back of Hy-Vee, you know, which is a big, ginormous grocery store, right? And it takes forever to get there. And who knows what the lines will look like. The gas station, you're going to be in and out much quicker typically. You also might want to time the gas station though. Don't go at rush hour, right? Go when there's maybe not very many people there. Go get them milk. And you can have your child, if they are familiar with schedules and they're familiar with checking things off, having them a part of that process can be helpful. So, maybe they are holding their schedule. They're taking it with them as you go get the milk. Okay, look, buddy, we got the milk, right? And you're having that conversation along the whole time. You're doing a really good job staying with mommy. You're doing awesome. I'm so proud of you. Almost there. We're going to go get that ice cream. Keep it up, buddy. And you're keeping up that encouragement as you're going through. So you want to just kind of keep all of that going. If you do see problem behavior, then you want to leave. And then they don't get the reinforcer. And then we try again, right? And we just kind of keep going through that process. But we take each trip as a data point, and we want to be monitoring, okay, how did that trip go? Was that great? Was it the same? It was okay, or was it horrible? And then we can make some adjustments from there. Like maybe the requirement was too much. Maybe going to get the milk in the gas station was too much because you actually did have to go find the cooler that it's in, versus just going to get the stick of gum that's right at the counter of the gas station, right? So maybe we then make the requirement a little bit less, or maybe we think about other things that should be incorporated. But a good starting point would be to reduce whatever that big community visit outing that is your end goal, reduce it to something very, very small, have it be really quick so that you can get in and out really fast to be able to then immediately provide that reward. And you want those rewards provided immediately.
Yeah.
You don't want a long delay. Going to the park, right? Is going to have a bit of a delay unless that park's right next to the gas station, which probably is not true. But the more you can give that immediate reward, the better. Any delays that are in there can end up over time rewarding some other inappropriate behaviors. So if you get to the car and now they all of a sudden start screaming because they're not at the park, and then you go to the park, well, now you've just rewarded the screaming with the park, right? And so you probably want, even if it's something small in the car, right, have that available. And then maybe you still go to the park as the big reward, but there's something right there for them as soon as they get there.
Thanks. That's super helpful. I really appreciate that. So very, very helpful for us to think about. And I love those stepped approaches. And that's that beauty of working with a behavior analyst. And I loved how you tied that in as a data point, really helpful. And so thinking about, other places. And so Sai, I wanted to see if you wanted to weigh in, and then Brandon, I also wanted to get your perspective on that too. Sai, go ahead.
Hearing Kelly talk about taking, what seems like a one-step activity, going to the grocery store for milk, but breaking it down into 50 steps really illustrates, actually how many skills are involved in some of the activities we ask of kids. And, if a parent woke up tomorrow morning and said, I want to be able to run a marathon, they would know, okay, I'm not going to start by running the marathon. I'm going to start by going for longer walks and then maybe going for short jogs. And I'm going to reward myself after those small victories and kind of build up. And we forget that when we ask a kid to go to the grocery store, that we may have to actually break it down into little bits and pieces and celebrate those small victories. And so one of the big challenges is going slow and being able to deliver that reinforcement really quickly so that kids get that positive feedback and know that, oh, bopping into the gas station for gum is actually not too bad, because when we get back to the car, we listen to my favorite music, or we get to do something fun. And you may have to bop in over and over and over again in the same way that you'd have to go for lots of short walks around the block to be able to meet that end goal.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. And it's, I think I also, as a pediatrician, I'm often thinking about ways that we can support that self-esteem building and the ways that we can build up the character of this child. So often we focus on the things that people can't do, right? And yet there are so many things they can do. So I love this stepped approach of, yes, we can go get the milk at the grocery store. We can do the one thing. Absolutely we can. And I think think that's also so impactful for parents to focus on what we can do. And so, yeah, I think this is awesome. And I know certainly whenever I'm talking with my patients and families, this idea of, yes, I understand it's really hard to do some of these things, and here are some things we can do. And so, Brandon, what would you add to this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial question about like a restaurant was one that I saw over and over and over and over again, maybe a little more before COVID. But I think I love Kelly and Sai's kind of approach of a stepwise approach. And so a lot of times what our families would do, they would start by ordering carry out and just bringing the kid with them and grabbing it and coming home. You can also call in a carry out order so that you get to sit at the restaurant and your food's right there. Because a lot of times what we see is the biggest difficulty is like, you get to the restaurant and then there's like all of this time that you're just sitting there with nothing to do, right? And so if you can call and just get that order ready to go, that might be a way to do it. And then I've also seen that families find like, what are the restaurants that have things to entertain my kid in the meantime, right? Like we should go to a place that has rolls or like peanuts that you can eat or like stuff that's just there right when you get there. And then you've got coloring activities. So you might order extra coloring stuff. You might bring the iPad. I actually was curious. Amber, I might ask you later on about like, are you a fan of kids bringing stuff with them to hospitals and places like that? I tell families that's fine. Bring it. You might get judged for your kid playing iPad at the dinner table, but you're going to get judged if they scream too. I'd rather have it judged for the iPad being there. You got kind of like all these like step-by-step reinforcers that are coming. And so I think in addition to that predictability and shortening and making it easier, like you might also find ways to get access to reinforcers throughout, the time there so that you kind of have broken it up into chunks and get good things happening in between. So those have been some of my experiences.
Absolutely, right? And let's think about it. Who hasn't gotten frustrated at a restaurant when the timing doesn't go the way you think it's going to go, right? And this is no different. So if we think about what autism is, if we root ourselves back into the diagnostic criteria, which our talk today isn't about, but we know that people with autism, that by definition, the definition includes difficulties when things don't go according to plan, right? So if they think, okay, we're going to eat at a restaurant. And so if we take that at its face value, go to eat at a restaurant, that does not mean walk in, wait for 20 minutes to get a table, sit at a table, wait for somebody to come, take our order, wait for 20 minutes to get our food. That's not what eat at a restaurant means in a black and white person's perspective, right? So I love that idea of ordering takeout to eat at the restaurant, because that is much more black and white thinking, right? Like eat at a restaurant means I walk in, sit down, eat at a restaurant, right? So I think that's a great way for us to think about it. And again, all of us have experienced frustration when we go to a restaurant and it doesn't go the way we predicted it to go. We, however, have learned over time that we don't get to pitch a fit about it. Well, but honestly, some of us do, right? Some of us call the manager. Some of us yell at the waitress. We shouldn't, but some of us do. And so think about it, right? These are our children's ways of communicating. I don't like this, right? And so I don't like this. This is not eating at a restaurant, people. And so I think it's important for all of us, our society, and I think that judgment piece is also important. I like how you said that too, where it's like, well, judged for iPad at the table, judged for screaming, but to be quite frank, right? We could get judged for calling the manager. We could get judged for getting up and walking off. We could get judged for not tipping the proper amount, what have you. And so it's kind of this whole interesting way of thinking about it. And so I like thinking about this in this perspective. It's really helpful to think through. And so obviously lots of behavior strategies. Sure. I could stay at home because I don't want to deal with the delay and it's not up to my expectations, but certainly there are really great creative ways for us to do that too. So Amber, what do you think about that when you are talking to families about coming in for a surgery, a procedure, an immunization? Bring your own stuff or rely on the facility to have what you need?
Yeah, no, I would always recommend to bring a preferred item from home, because you know what your child likes at home. You know what is their comfort item, whether it's a blanket or their favorite game or a stuffed animal or a baby doll, whatever it is. And then you have the opportunity, you know, at a hospital where there's child life, that maybe there's a more exciting item that's new and that can provide a little bit more distraction than that comfort item. But you always have that comfort item as an option, right? So you always have something that they want. But then you think about it with that can do, we should do that as parents, but also as providers, right? So you can use your comfort item, or you can use this item that we have right here. So kind of bringing that back around as well.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, so I think this is great. So let's talk a little bit about school. Brandon, you had a great example in school about, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here, but a kiddo gets frustrated, doesn't want to complete an assignment. Again, a big paraphrase, but doesn't want to complete something. Teacher's like, fine, leave, you're not going to do it, leave the classroom, right? And the kid's like, and I have this conversation again with families multiple times a day when I'm in clinic, and the kid's literally like, sweet, right? And I always have to remind the parent that it may not be literally them thinking manipulatively, sweet, I got out of it, but from a behavioral perspective, again, so not that they're consciously in their minds being like, aha, I win, but I protest and I got out of it. And so what are some strategies for teachers and or parents who find themselves in this pickle where kiddo doesn't want to complete the task, and teacher, we'll just keep it in the school setting for a minute, but you can imagine across at home or therapy or whatever, is like, oh, all right, then leave, right? So how do we, and I know this is a complex, could be a complex scenario here, but Brandon, what are some just initial thoughts about what we could help that frustrated person in those response moments?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is evaluating your own behavior, right? Like it's an avoidance tactic on your part to say, like, I'm frustrated with this kid, let's get him out of the classroom, right? So I think that's the first thing, is thinking about what's the purpose behind what you're doing, right? Because it's not helping the kid to send them out, even if it's not, if you don't even think about it behaviorally for like what that they're escaping work. If you just think about it as like, there's no way that sending a kid out in the hall helps. So if you're thinking about your behavior first, why are you doing it? Maybe let's focus there first. And then the next thing is thinking about what adjustments could we make? Like, why is this kid, going a little bit deeper, like, why is this kid so avoidant of this work, right? Is it that the work is too hard and we need like some sort of a curriculum adjustment, or that they need to do less work, or that we don't have enough reinforcement for their engaging in that work? Or do I need to reteach the material in a different way? So kind of like going through, like, even though there are these escape tendencies, like there could be something deeper there that we need to think through as a part of it. And then helping them get access to a break, again, more appropriately. Like, I would always much rather a kid just says, hey, this is really hard for me, can you help me, or can I take a break from this, versus throwing the tantrum and getting out in the hall. So those would be the first things that go through my head. But I'd be curious if Kelly or Sai have other thoughts, because I'm sure there's a lot of different ways you could take that.
Yeah, no, that was helpful though too, because I think I'm going to kick it over to Sai and Kelly here in just a second, but I think that's great. And for adults to take a second, reflect on that, again, I feel like it's an overused analogy, but I still think it's a helpful one. Put your own oxygen mask on first, right? So kind of like okay, right? I'm frustrated. I need to breathe for a second, think. But I will admit that there's an element there in that moment where clearly, if we were to take the time to think about it, and as a parent, I'll admit, so it's not a lot different when you're frustrated as a parent saying, go to your room, like, cause you're like, do what I say, I don't know, go to your room. So yes, there are places where that is appropriate, FYI, but the knee jerk go to your room though may not be appropriate. And so what I'm trying to say is, sometimes that professional, the teacher, the parent, just may not know what to do. So their toolbox is shallow, and they may just not know what else to do. So I think that is a place where, as a community, we can also be trying to serve and fill up the toolboxes of the parent, the teachers, the professionals, so that they have more to be able to say to the child, hey, buddy, like, let's talk about, is this hard? I see you're frustrated, things like that. And so anyway, it just struck me what you said there, because yes, I think you're right. It is avoidance on the part of on that person. So thank you for that.
I will say real quick, it's a lot easier to say that and to do that in a professional setting than it is when it's to your own kids. I'm a lot better behavior analyst with other kids than with other people's kids than with mine. So there's just too much emotion involved. Sometimes it's hard.
Oh, I'm a way better pediatrician to other people's children than I am to my poor child. So yes, I completely hear you. It's hard. It's really hard. All right. So Kelly, do you want to help us think through kind of that same concept, and then we'll go to Cy for that too.
Yeah. So I think what Brandon said is spot on. I think so. We do what we've learned, and so when a teacher or a parent sends their kid off from an instruction, they are getting you as the adult are being reinforced because the behavior goes away, right? And so you are learning every single time you do that that is effective for you, but it's not effective for the child, right? And so when we think from the child perspective, so if it's happened once and you say go to the principal's office or go to your room, don't like beat yourself up over that. We all do it. But if you see this routinely happening, that every time you put that task in front of that child, they're engaging in those behaviors and you engage in the same thing, that's when we really need to reevaluate, okay, what are they getting out of it? And when we think of the principal's office, you have to think about what's happening in the principal's office too. So it's not just, is there something going on with the task that's maybe triggering it? That certainly can be the case. But often what I hear is I'll ask the kid, so who's your favorite person in the building? And you know who they say? The principal or the nurse or the librarian or whoever they are sent to, that is who their favorite person in the building is. Because when they get there, they get to like have fun, they play games, they get popsicles, they get all kinds of things. And so they get more reinforcement. They get that positive reinforcement in addition to that negative reinforcement. So they get this interactive effect by engaging in that behavior and getting out of it. So we do have to look at all aspects of that to figure out, what's going to be best. So, if that's the case, they love the principal, teaching them to ask for the break or to do a little bit and then go see the principal and tell them how great they did on their work is would be ideal. But also from a teacher perspective, we can't have disruptive kids in the classroom. If you're in a classroom of 20 kids and the kid's tearing the room apart, the teacher realistically can't keep that kid there to keep everybody else safe. And so then what do? And maybe they do go to the principal, but maybe the work goes with them and that they don't leave and come back to the classroom till they've calmed down, they've completed a portion of the work, and then we transition them back. And so there's a variety of things we can do to teach that. But I do think, one of the important things to remember is when we allow kids out of task instructions that we've asked them to complete, and we are doing this routinely, we are continuing to teach them that they don't have to follow instructions. And that's not going to get us very far as they age and get into working in the community and living independently and things like that. And so, that is a skill that we do want to work on, but you can still give them some control over parts of that. What do we do first or not, but evaluating the whole situation more fully.
Yeah, absolutely. So Cy, what would you add to that?
Just that hearing Kelly and Brandon talk about it reminds me that this is, there's no single strategy that's going to magically make these behaviors go away. It's accumulating strategies and, to Kelly's point, making sure that anybody in the environment is on board. And so the principal's got to know that providing all that attention and support in the principal's office, while not, inherently a bad thing, is reinforcing the child for this behavior so that they can access it. And so we just got to turn the tables. We've got to have an all hands on deck approach to making sure that all that attention and support is provided in response to the child making progress on their work instead of, acting out in class to get there. In hospital settings, making sure that the nursing staff and child life and anybody wandering the halls knows not to pay attention to that child who flopped in the middle of the clinic floor. But when they get up and start walking, that's the time to start praising. That's an easy thing, but it's only easy if you know in advance that this is an important strategy to use. All of our instincts work against us unless we have that all hands on deck behavior approach.
I love it. I love it. So we're coming to a close, but this has been a great opportunity to hear from experts in behavior and supporting kiddos when they are experiencing different kinds of behaviors, many of which are just normal old behaviors that each of us as human beings experience every single day. You know, as adults, we have developed all kinds of strategies for ourselves over the years that we use to maximize our own behavior. And we as adults now get to help little people do that as well. And so we got to hear today about professionals that we call board certified behavior analysts and other professionals that work alongside them, psychologists, child life specialists, all kinds of people that are working to support the growth and development of children, particularly those with autism, to learn and adapt their behavior to maximize their opportunities in our communities. And so I think I've learned a ton, and so I'm super thankful for this team and the things that they do each and every day. I think one of the take-home messages that I think is most important is that there's a lot that each of us can do to support kids in their own environments and families. And so the things that we can do to get a chance to go to the grocery store, to go to a restaurant, to have a better experience in the hospital or getting an immunization at the doctor's visit. But there's also a lot that we can do just for our own day-to-day lives, getting, you know, our morning routine back on track. If morning routines are really challenging, you know, I loved some of the visuals that were in the talk about using the little Velcro flip boxes. Obviously, I've seen lots and lots of visual schedules and have used many of them, but you know, there's lots of opportunities, and differentiating those for each individual is so important, because each person is unique, right? And so of course it's going to be irritating to some if you try to give them kitty pictures that make no sense to them or that feel like they're too childish. And so working with each person as a person is really important, and finding what's going to make them or help them the most. And so certainly this has been a very, very insightful and important time together. And I am so hopeful that whoever's listening and learning together with us is having a chance to also learn for their own purposes as well. So thank you guys so much for your time. And I look forward to seeing you all on Echo Autism Behavior Solutions. Thanks, everybody.